This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of March 19th, 2023. What's on my mind this week? Well, how large language models are changing everything. Well then, this was certainly weak. First, apologies. It's another week of all AI all the time, but in fairness, it's worth it. This past week was stuffed to the gills with AI announcements. So let's talk about these announcements, what they mean, and what you should be doing about them. We have three things to talk about: Palm, Copilot, and GPT-4. Palm is Google's newest large language model. Palm stands for Pathways Language Model. Google announced this week that Palm, a model with 540 billion parameters, would be rolled out soon, especially in productivity software like Gmail and Google Docs. You'll be able to access the Palm model through prompts in these software packages, as well as developers being able to call the Palm API through Google Cloud. As one would expect in a Gmail document, help me write this email, right? Help me write this Google Doc. That's what that's all about. The second big development this week was the announcement of Microsoft Copilot. This is GPT-4 integration of the language model into the Microsoft Office productivity suite. Think about Clippy on steroids and actually useful. With Office 365's knowledge of your company's corpus of data, it will be able to construct tuned first drafts based on your data. Some of the examples shown in the demo were deriving a presentation, a PowerPoint, from Word documents, which would be awfully handy for folks like me needing to make a new keynote talk. I could take the transcript from this newsletter and turn it into a deck. That would be pretty cool. The third big announcement came from OpenAI itself this week, which was the release of the GPT-4 model. A couple of things set GPT-4 apart from previous models. First, it's a much bigger model. OpenAI has not said exactly how big, but it's reasonable to assume it's in the hundreds of billions of parameters. One interesting thing, it has no new knowledge. It still has the same September 2021 cutoff. I was very surprised that it did not have new information. Instead, it just has many more parameters. A brief side on parameters, because you'll hear this term a lot. When you hear someone talking about model parameter sizes, what does that mean? A parameter, to dramatically simplify it, is a value. It's a number that describes the relationship between entities, words, in a model. For example, suppose we examine this sentence, which has 10 words. A parameter would be the relationship of the first word in the sentence to the second word. And then the second parameter would be the second word to the third word, and so on and so forth. It's essentially the frequency of one word with respect to another. If a sentence in this very crude example has 10 words, it would have, in the first pass, 9 of these parameters. Now, it's a lot more complicated than that, about activations and neurons and stuff like that inside a model, but it gives you a sense of how large these models are. They're trained on enormous amounts of text, and then the relationships between words are mathematically calculated over and over again until you get these parameters, billions of parameters. They're really probabilities, right? Then when you and I use these models in an interface, say like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, it's drawing on those parameters, those probabilities, to predict what words to put together. Generally speaking, more parameters means a better performing model. So that's what that means. GPT-4 has been released and now contains, like a gazillion parameters, however many it is. That means it'll be able to take in more text in prompts and return more text too. That's useful. It also has something new, something that hasn't been made available to the public yet, but will be available soon through the API: multimodality. The model will be able to accept an image as an input and spit out text. Put in a photo of your dog, and GPT-4 will be able to describe the photo, maybe tell you your dog's breed, etc. Otherwise, it's a bigger, more accurate model that does everything previous versions have done. The new model is available inside ChatGPT if you're a paying subscriber. So those are the facts, right? That's what happened. Now, let's talk about what all this means. First, let's address multimodality, because that's important. Right now, the GPT-4 model can take in images or text and spit out text. Now, it is not a stretch of the imagination, especially given that OpenAI develops and owns DALL-E 2, the image generation service, to imagine that future version of GPT, like GPT-5, will have the ability to spit out multiple formats as well. But that's down the road. The ingestion of images itself is going to be a really big game changer for a lot of companies and businesses, because image data is informationally dense, right? There's the old expression, the cliche, a picture is worth 10,000 words. That is more true than ever. We can pack a tremendous amount of information to a single image, something that requires a ton of words to even approximate, right? Imagine a photo of these headphones, right? How many words would it take you to describe them? Right? Lots of words. Black headphones. Well, that's not very specific. Well, black round headphones. Well, and there's this part, and there's the band, and there's the cushions. It's a lot of words, right? One image contains all that information. So what would you use this capability for? There are obvious applications like optical character recognition, or OCR, right? Put in a picture of a page of text and it'll recognize the text. That's nothing new. Then there are things like captions. Put in a photo, get a caption accurately describing the photo. Again, nothing new, except that the accessibility of these capabilities will be greater than ever. Now, start to expand your mind about what you can put in images that a machine could interpret for us. Suppose you put in a picture of, say, a page of a music score, right? The machine could read that, interpret it, and then return maybe a variation based on what it's processed. That's not a capability machines have today. Suppose... what have I got here? Yeah, here we go. Suppose you had some ancient text, right? Like Sanskrit, which is a decent number of Buddhist texts are in, or Sumerian or Babylonian, stuff where there's a tremendous amount of public data that the models would know, but it's hard to access documents or tools. Amateurs like you and me, assuming you're not a Sumerian scholar or a Sanskrit scholar, if you are, you can already do this stuff. But amateurs like you and me will be able to use tools like GPT-4 to translate, to interpret, and maybe even extrapolate data that's been locked away in images. Think about that. That opens up the possibility for us to be like citizen researchers of sorts, interpreting content that we otherwise can't. It's just locked away. Where is... This is a book from Japan, from my teacher, my teacher's teacher's teacher, Masaaki Hatsumi. This is all in Japanese. It's all his writing about the martial arts and things. And yes, I could use existing tools like DeepL, for example, to be able to do some of the translation. But boy, it sure would be handy just to take a photo of some of the pages that I'm curious about and just have the machine learning model do the extrapolation. The large language models do better in some cases with esoteric text than traditional translation models do because of the way language works. Right? So that's some of the capabilities. Now, again, let's expand our minds a bit more. You and I, because we're marketing folks, we're looking at images all the time. Where? In our reporting tools. One of the first use cases I plan to tackle once I get access to the GPT-4 API is to feed it screenshots of stuff like Google Analytics. I want to feed it into the model and have it write a synopsis, a summary of what it sees. Descriptive analytics will be much easier for many of us when a machine does the first pass of just describing what happened, what it sees in the chart. That frees us up to derive more insights from the data rather than burn a lot of time processing the data itself. That's a pretty obvious use case, but it's from a use perspective, it's not something that we can do today. I wholly would expect Google Analytics to have access to the PaLM model, right? I would expect a company like Adobe to follow suit. I would be shocked if they didn't. Having a large language model in a tool like After Effects or Audition or Premiere or Photoshop would be a game changer. I mean, can you imagine loading an image into Photoshop and then just typing a prompt saying, colorize this photo, fix any defects, and remove my X from this old photo. Right now, there's a lot of steps that you do in Photoshop to do that. A large language model integrated into the software would make that a whole lot easier. So that's all pretty cool. That is also probably the least interesting thing that happened this week. Copilot and PaLM are big deals. Not because they're better versions of Clippy, right? but because they fundamentally change the role and nature of the office worker. They fundamentally change it. Pop quiz for you, for those of you who've been keeping up on this topic. What profession is writing prompts for tools like ChatGPT? Now, we've called them prompt engineers, but what profession really is that? That's programming. When you write prompts for ChatGPT or any large language model, Microsoft Copilot, etc., you are programming. You are writing instructions to a machine that direct the machine to do things. Now, it's true, it doesn't look like C or Python or R or Java, right? The traditional programming languages. But you are still writing instructions to a machine in a specific format to achieve a specific result. Prompt engineering is really software development. It's programming and software development. Do you get it now? When every office worker is using prompts and large language models in their day-to-day work, Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel and Outlook, that transforms every office worker into a programmer. Every office worker is a developer. Every office worker is a prompt engineer. When you write a prompt that works well to convert an Excel spreadsheet into a set of PowerPoint slides, you are writing software. Just because it doesn't look like traditional code doesn't mean it's not software. It is. That means every role that uses office software is going to need coaching, training, professional development to some degree on prompt engineering and software development. Folks will need to learn how to construct prompts that help them do their jobs better, to help them make the most of these awesome integrations into these large language models. And this is every profession, right? If you're a software company with complex software like CRMs, accounting software, etc., and integration of a large language model isn't on your roadmap soon, it better be, or you're going out of business, right? This past week, HubSpot announced ChatSpot, the integration of GPT models into the HubSpot CRM. That transforms sales folks into software developers, right? Because they're going to write prompts to talk to the CRM, to get it to do things. That's programming. This is the kind of agility that every software company needs to be bringing to the table right now. And it gets bigger than that. What is programming? What is software? It is intellectual property. It is valuable stuff. Companies jealously guard their software, their code, right? Apple and Microsoft and everybody jealously guard their code. Companies file patents, file lawsuits to defend their code. When every employee is a programmer, every employee's work is software. Every prompt that an employee writes, from the CEO to the intern, is code that could be valuable to the company, which means we should be thinking of prompts as software and protecting them as such. I see tons of folks right now offering downloads and ebooks and tutorials and selections and collections of prompts, and I think that's cool, right? They're showing some thought leadership. They're essentially open sourcing their software, right? They're giving these prompts away. They're open sourcing their software. You may not want to do that with your prompts, with your employee-generated software. You need to be thinking about that and developing policies and processes around that to plan for that now, before these tools roll out en masse. This is going to radically change our talent wars. Because of the nature of prompt engineering, writing computer code in plain language, we may find that the people who are most successful at writing prompts are not the traditional coders and developers, not the Mountain Dew chugging nerd who sits in the corner in the dark with their headphones on. Folks who are good at writing in general can be very successful writing prompts for machines. And that means your best ideas, your best software may be popping up in departments and employees in your company that you don't normally look to as software development hubs, hotspots of software development in your company. Your administrative assistant will have a book of prompts, their software that they wrote, that work really well for them, right? They're a software developer now. And we should be opening our eyes to who in our companies may have exceptional talent developing this kind of software. Your secret sauce, your next big thing, your big idea may not come from the usual places in your company if you're open-minded. Right? Your janitorial staff that has to enter their timesheets in, may write a prompt in Excel that creates incredible unexpected results, but only if you know to look for it. Mind blown yet? We're not done. So far, we've only talked about the human-computer interface, the way people interact with these models and through prompts. People scale poorly. There's only so many prompts per minute that you can copy and paste into a machine, right? This week, OpenAI announced the API, the Application Programming Interface, for GPT-4. And last week made the public available version of the API for GPT 3.5 Turbo, aka the model that ChatGPT uses most of the time. Why does this matter? An API allows a prompt to scale. Instead of a person typing this prompt in, a piece of software, another piece of software that traditional coders would write, issues the prompt via the API to one of the GPT models and gets the result back. I wrote an example of this in the Trust Insights newsletter a couple of weeks ago for sentiment analysis. I took 50 articles about International Women's Day and had the software talk to the GPT 3.5 Turbo model through the API and process all 50 articles. I did not sit there and copy paste 50 articles into ChatGPT. No, that's silly. I sent them all in via the API with the same prompt that was hard coded in the software that I wrote, and I got 50 results back, good quality results in the blink of an eye. That's how large language models scale. We use other software to talk to them in large batches, and that means when you find prompts that work, prompts that create exceptional and reliable results, you can write additional code to turn these prompts into full-fledged scalable software. Instead of one employee typing in a prompt to generate a PowerPoint deck from a spreadsheet, you'll have software in your company that takes hundreds of spreadsheets and it assembles hundreds of decks in the blink of an eye. And that means every prompt that every employee writes has the potential to graduate, right? To grow up, to be real enterprise software. That prompt you wrote that converts a transcript and meeting notes and action items, a piece of code could wrap that prompt into something that can talk to an API and convert your entire meeting recording system into action items for everyone in the company. You have a call center person who takes a customer service inbox and uses the prompts to process those. Deploy that system-wide, and suddenly your customer service jumps up a huge level because you've built that into the system itself to handle that customer service issue the way that one employee did with their prompt, but now you scaled it to everybody in the company. Prompts are like the steering wheels that guide the engine of the large language model, and when they're put inside the rest of the car, they make the car drivable by anyone. More than that, they allow us to mass produce the car. That's, in this analogy, mass producing high-functioning software. That means the prompts that our employees are writing today could be the secret sauce for a totally different way of doing business tomorrow. We should be thinking about how to train employees, how to guide employees, and how to capture all that knowledge that employees will be generating with these new tools very, very soon. As an employee, you should be looking hard at the contracts you sign with employers, your employment agreements, and talking to your lawyer about intellectual property protections for the work that you do, for pay increases tied to the software that you write, because you're a developer now. You are a developer now. And looking especially at employee agreements, this is really important. You should be talking to your lawyer about strict protections for stuff you do outside of work that's not work related, because there are some employee agreements out there that they really suck, that say anything you do, whether you're at work or not, is the company's, right? Do not sign those agreements, and talk to some legal help about how do I construct an employee agreement that allows me to do stuff outside of work that is not, I'm not being paid for, but that you could turn into a business, right? Because again, you're a software developer. If you're using Microsoft Word outside of work and you come up with a prompt that works really well, who owns that? Who should have the right to make money on that? If your employee agreement is not clear, you might just be handing more money to your company. If your employee agreement says everything I do outside of the 9 to 5 on my own time, not at the direction of the company, not on company equipment, is mine, and I get to keep it and I get to make money on it. So you got to talk to your lawyer. The game has changed. Life, business has changed. Tech folks have long said that software will eat everything. And they were right, but not in the way they imagined. Instead, we've all become developers thanks to large language models, thanks to these interfaces to our computers. And every one of us is or will be writing software very soon. If you've used ChatGPT, you have written software. Now is the time to get in front of this, to develop processes, policies, and procedures that are fair and equitable for everyone, and to seize the advantage ahead of slower competitors. Now is the time to get ahead of the talent war that's coming. It's coming as we look for people who can work in these new environments and innovate at every level of work. As these new tools roll out, it is anyone's game to win. Let's make sure that you and I are the winners, shall we? All right, what else happened this week? Trust Insights, the company I co-founded with Katie Robert, we turned 5 years old this week. So we had some birthday celebrations on our live stream and in our newsletter. Go check that out. It was a lovely feeling to say we made it half a decade through probably some of the most adverse circumstances you can start a business in, like, a global pandemic. But super happy about how that all turned out. In jobs this week, analytics manager at Tracken, associate marketing analyst at CBC, chief digital officer at Forsyth Barnes, consumer engagement and content manager at GoodRx, digital analytics specialist at RIA Group, director of data analytics at Location 3, marketing manager at Paxera Health, paid media analytics specialist at digital marketing specialist, kind of a strange name for a company, search engine marketing manager at Within, and VP of marketing at Instrumental. So lots of hiring still going on. For ads this week, go check out the LinkedIn course that we have out, personal branding and stuff. And I probably need to go revise part of that because we do talk about large language models in there, and everything changed again. It's so funny. I did a talk last weekend at PodCamp Philly about large language models, introducing the concept, and the talk's already outdated. Woo! What else is happening this week in the news? Got TikTok ad libraries measuring ROI on social media campaigns. Our friends at Agorapulse have released their integration to Google Analytics 4. I will say this. I love their company. I love their software, except for the batch loader. That needs a lot of help. And I love the integration with Google Analytics 4 on paper. However, if your company has not set up Google Analytics 4 properly, it ain't going to help you, right? The integration will only integrate bad information into the system. So if you want help with Google Analytics 4, call me. Hit reply on the newsletter. Trust Insights, we do that. There's a big old ad in the newsletter about Google Analytics 4. You have about 3 months to get it up and running before Universal Analytics shuts down. So get going on that. And if you're not feeling up to it, you know who to call. We have remote and contract workers and their fit into agencies, reflections on generative AI, schema improvements for deliberate SEO improvements. We have, of course, all things ChatGPT and GPT-4 this week in the regular news. Some interesting stuff in the analytics section on detecting cyberbullying with topic modeling and sentiment analysis, which I think is pretty cool. YouTube adding multi-language audio analytics. And then in the dealer's choice, a really interesting piece on the urgent need for ratings transparency in streaming. This, again, is a lot of stuff that comes out of the work I've been doing with the Warrior Nun campaign. And the thing that we're finding is that there are no standards for how shows are performing on different streaming platforms, which means that people who work in those industries may be getting screwed on pay and stuff if they're being told, oh, well, this show didn't perform, and then clearly it did by most objective measures. So there needs to be some kind of rating system, the way there is for like the Nielsen ratings for regular television for streaming services. Upcoming events at the end of this month, in just a couple of weeks, I'll be at Martechopia in London. I'll be doing the ChatGPT keynote. I've already had to change my slides. Right? I told the organizers, I'm going to do this talk, but there's a very good chance that I'll be working on my slides the night before, perhaps the morning of, depending on what gets announced that week. I'll be at B2B Ignite in Chicago in May, and Marketing Prof's B2B Forum in October. I'll be doing the ChatGPT talk there as well, and who knows what I'll be talking about by the time October rolls around, but that's what's coming. That's the news for this week. It was a longer edition than normal because of everything that's happening in AI, but I hope that You have a bigger picture sense of the implications of all this stuff. Right? I see a lot of content right now, people talking about, how to use this prompt or do this thing, and not a lot of people talking about the implications. Not a lot of people talking about the bigger picture. You know it now. You are ahead of the crowd. So make good use of that knowledge. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
If you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.